That cold evening, no one expected a rusty metal door to change a life. What started as just another abandoned storage unit became a story the whole town tried to explain, and few had the courage to tell. Before we begin, subscribe and turn on the bell. Here we show that behind locked doors and forgotten boxes, there are still human hearts. Elena gripped the steering wheel of her old Ford, the engine ticking like a weary heartbeat as she pulled into the storage facility lot. The sun hung low over the jagged rooftops of the industrial park, painting the chain-link fence in bruised oranges and purples. Distant traffic hummed beyond the perimeter, a constant reminder of the world moving on without her. She was 38. A single mom with calluses on her hands from waitressing shifts that blurred into nights of math, bills stacking like accusations on the kitchen table. Her husband, Marco, had been gone 2 years now, taken by a factory accident that left her with a daughter to raise and a mortgage that whispered threats in the dark. This auction, this gamble on a forgotten unit, was her last shot. She'd scraped together $500 from tips and a pawned necklace, the one Marco had given her on their anniversary. If it was junk, she'd be back to square one. If it was something more, well, hope was a dangerous thing, but desperation was worse. The facility was a maze of metal doors, each one a blank face under the fading light. Fluorescent bulbs buzzed to life along the corridors as the auctioneer, a grizzled man named Hank with a clipboard and a voice like gravel, gathered the bidders. There were maybe a dozen, mostly flippers in faded jeans, eyes sharp for deals, and a couple of retirees scanning for nostalgia. Elena stood at the back, her arms crossed over her faded denim jacket, the weight of her daughter's backpack slung over one shoulder like an anchor. Sophia was 8, waiting at the neighbors with a coloring book and promises of ice cream if Mama came home with good news. Elena hadn't told her about the auction. Some risks you carried alone. Hank rattled off the details. Unit 47, abandoned for over a year, liens paid, contents unknown. No peek inside, rules were rules. Bidding started at 200. Elena's heart thudded as the numbers climbed, flippers calling out like it was sport. She raised a hand at 380, voice steady despite the tremor in her fingers. A burly man in a trucker hat pushed to 450. She swallowed, thinking of the eviction notice tucked in her glove compartment. The way Sophia's shoes were splitting at the toes. 500, she said, the words scraping out. The lot fell quiet. The trucker eyed her, shrugged, and dropped out. Sold to the woman in the back, Hank announced, slapping his clipboard. Elena handed over the cash, her palms sweaty against the bills, and received a key on a ring that felt too heavy for what it promised. The unit was at the end of a long corridor, the air thick with the scent of dust and rust, warm asphalt radiating heat from the day's sun. She walked alone now, the auction crowd dispersing like shadows. Her boots echoed on the concrete, each step amplifying the knot in her stomach. What if it was nothing? Boxes of moldy clothes, broken furniture from someone else's broken life. Or worse, something she couldn't touch, couldn't sell without questions. The moral weight of it pressed on her. This wasn't hers, not really. It was abandoned, sure, but abandonment carried ghosts. She reached Unit 47, the door a slab of dented steel with a padlock that gleamed dully under the buzzing light. Her fingers hesitated on the key, the metal cool and foreign. A bead of sweat traced her temple despite the evening chill. She imagined Marco's voice, steady as he used to be after long shifts. Take the chance, Elena. For Sophia. With a breath that rattled in her chest, she turned the key. The lock clicked open, a sound like a confession. She tugged the door upward, the rollers groaning in protest, revealing a sliver of darkness inside. The air that wafted out was stale, laced with leather and faint mildew like old attics forgotten in summer. She flicked on her phone's flashlight, the beam cutting through the gloom. Stacked against the far wall, in neat rows that reached almost to the ceiling, were suitcases. Dozens of them, old ones, the kind from another era, leather-bound with brass latches, vinyl-sided with faded travel stickers from places like Paris and Rome, hard-shell cases cracked from years of journeys. They weren't tossed in haphazardly. They were arranged almost reverently, like relics in a museum no one visited. No furniture, no appliances, just these vessels of lives packed away. Elena's pulse quickened. This wasn't the chaos of a hoarder or the scrap of a failed business. It felt intentional, personal. She stepped inside, the concrete floor gritty under her shoes, and ran her hand over the nearest case, a battered brown one with a handle worn smooth. The latches were locked, initials etched faintly, E.M. Her mind raced. Stolen luggage, smuggled goods, or just the remnants of someone who traveled too much and came back empty. The thought sent a chill through her. She'd heard stories at the diner, units like this hiding drugs, weapons, worse, but these looked ordinary, almost sad, gathering dust in the dim light filtering through the half-open door. She should open one, just one, see what she'd bought into. Her fingers hovered over the latch, but doubt rooted her in place. What if it was evidence of something criminal? Calling the police now would mean losing the unit, the money, the hope. Walking away felt like surrender. The corridor light buzzed louder in her ears, the distant hum of traffic mocking her isolation. Instead, she backed out, relocking the door with hands that shook. The key bit into her palm as she pocketed it. Not tonight. She needed time to think, to let the weight settle. Driving home through the twilight, the suitcases haunted her rearview mirror. Sophia greeted her at the door with a hug that smelled of crayons and innocence, chattering about school while Eleanor heated canned soup. But as she tucked her daughter into bed, kissing her forehead and whispering, "Good night," the questions clawed at her. What lives were sealed in those cases, junk to sell for rent money, or secrets that could unravel everything? Lying awake later, the apartment's thin walls creaking with night sounds, Eleanor stared at the ceiling cracks. Marco's photo on the nightstand watched her, his smile a ghost of support. Failure loomed. Another bill unpaid, Sophia's dreams deferred, but curiosity burned brighter. One suitcase, maybe, held something real, a chance or a curse. By morning, resolve hardened. She'd go back, open it all, face whatever doors those latches hid. Little did she know the first one would crack open not just leather, but a story buried deeper than debt or grief. The morning sun filtered through the thin curtains of Elena's apartment, casting long shadows across the cluttered kitchen table where bills lay like unanswered prayers. She hadn't slept much. The suitcases invading her dreams, stacked towers that toppled, spilling out faded photographs and whispers of lives she couldn't place. Sophia was already up, humming a tune from her favorite cartoon as she poured cereal into a bowl, her small feet padding across the linoleum. Eleanor watched her from the doorway, a pang twisting in her chest. 8 years old, with Marco's dark curls and a laugh that could pierce the heaviest fog. How many mornings like this had they stolen since the accident? Too few, and each one a reminder of what Elena fought to hold together. "I made you some," Sophia said, sliding a bowl toward her with a grin. Elena forced a smile, stirring the flakes absently. The key to Unit 47 weighed heavy in her pocket, a talisman of risk. She couldn't tell Sophia, not yet. Kids deserved shields from the world's sharp edges. "Be good for Mrs. Ramirez today," she said instead, kissing her daughter's forehead. "Mama's got work." Lies layered like the dust in that unit, but necessary. She dropped Sophia at the neighbors, the older woman's knowing nod a small comfort, then headed out, the Ford's engine protesting the early hour. The storage facility looked different in daylight, less ominous under the pale blue sky. The industrial yard stretched out, chain-link fences rattling faintly in the breeze, the air carrying the sharp tang of oil from nearby garages. Elena parked closer this time, her boots crunching on gravel as she made her way to the corridor. The fluorescent lights hummed even now, casting a sterile glow over the metal doors, each one a silent sentinel. Her pulse quickened with every step, the echo of her footsteps amplifying the isolation. What if someone had come in the night, claimed it back? Or worse, what if the suitcases held something that marked her as part of whatever story had abandoned them? Unit 47 waited, unchanged, the padlock glinting like an accusation. She fumbled the key in, the click louder than yesterday, a point of no return. The door rolled up with a metallic scrape that set her teeth on edge, releasing that same stale breath of leather and age. Sunlight slanted in, illuminating the rows more clearly now. They were old, these suitcases, vintage pieces from the 70s and 80s, by the look of the stitching and buckles. Some bore scuffs from airport carousels, stickers peeling from destinations long faded, London fog, New York skylines, a Eiffel Tower half eroded by time. No chaos, no overflow. They were packed tight, labels facing out like invitations. Elena stepped inside, the space cooler than the yard, the concrete floor holding the night's chill. Dust motes danced in the beam from the open door, and she coughed lightly, waving them away. She chose the nearest one again, the brown leather case with EM initials. Her fingers trembled as she tested the latches, locked, but not securely. A small crowbar from her trunk would do, but hesitation gripped her. This felt like trespassing on graves. Instead, she moved to a smaller, vinyl-sided one at knee height, its blue fabric faded to grey, a travel tag dangling like a forgotten name. No lock, the clasps were merely stiff from disuse. Heart-pounding she knelt, the grit biting her knees, and flipped them open. The hinges creaked, revealing folds of clothing, men's shirts, starched collars yellowed, paired with trousers that smelled of mothballs and faint cologne. Beneath them, toiletries, a razor, shaving cream. A passport expired in 1995. The photo inside showed a man in his 40s, stern-faced with wire-rimmed glasses, stamped entries from Europe and Asia. Elena's breath caught. Not junk, personal, intimate, deeper in, a leather wallet, empty of cards but for a faded driver's license. Elias Morrow, born 1948, address in a nearby suburb. The name tugged at something. Had she heard it at the diner? A regular? No, that wasn't it. She set it aside, hands careful, and lifted a layer of what looked like notebooks. Journals, actually, pages filled with neat script, dates, cities, expenses. Berlin, met contact, deal secured, payment in cases. Her stomach knotted. Deal? What kind? The words blurred as paranoia crept in. Smuggling, black market? She imagined police lights flashing in her rear view. Sophia taken away while Eleanor explained a unit full of contraband. But it could be innocent, a salesman's life, peddling luggage or antiques. Still, the coherence unnerved her. No one stored a lifetime like this, without reason. A shadow fell across the doorway, and Elena startled, slamming the case shut. Need a hand? The voice was gruff but kind, belonging to a man in overalls, toolbox in hand. He was in his late 50s, salt and pepper hair under a faded cap, skin weathered from years in the yard. Name's Ray, maintenance here. Saw you yesterday at the auction. Everything all right? She stood, brushing dust from her jeans, throat dry. Yeah, just sorting. Lying felt wrong, but trust came slow these days. Ray nodded, eyeing the stacks without surprise. Seen units like this before, traveler maybe, or collector, but that many? Odd. He stepped closer, peering at the open case. Elias, huh? Knew a Morrow back in the day. Worked imports at the port. Disappeared round 10 years ago. Wife said he chased deals overseas, then poof, left everything. His words hung, reframing the suitcases from threat to tragedy. Not crime, perhaps, but loss. A man who'd packed his world and never unpacked. Elena's mind raced, disappeared. The journals, were they clues? You think it's his? Ray shrugged, wiping his hands on a rag. Could be. Folks leave pieces behind when life unravels, but if it's valuable, best document it. Call the office, get a manifest, don't want trouble. His eyes met hers, steady, seeing the fear she tried to hide. For the first time since Marco, someone offered anchor without asking for her story. I can help if you want, no charge, beats fixing leaks alone. She hesitated, the weight of decision pressing. Open more? Dig deeper into Elias's ghost? Or lock it up? Walk away from the temptation? The air thickened with the scent of old leather, the distant traffic a murmur of normalcy she craved. Ray waited, impatient as the buzzing lights overhead. Finally, she nodded. All right, but slow. I need to know what this is before it knows me. Together, they pulled another case forward, the latches yielding with a pop that echoed like fate shifting. Inside, not cash or contraband, but letters, yellowed envelopes tied with string, addressed to a woman named Clara. Eleanor's fingers brushed one, the paper soft as memory. The secret wasn't in the wealth she sensed, but in the why, a life interrupted, waiting for someone brave enough to finish it. As Ray handed her a flashlight, the darkness inside the unit seemed less empty, more like a path she might navigate. But with each reveal, the moral fork sharpened, keep the past buried, or unearth it for truths that could heal or haunt. Ray's flashlight beams sliced through the dimness, steadying on the next suitcase, a sturdy, hard-shell one, its surface etched with faint scratches like scars from rough handling. Elena's hands felt clammy as she knelt beside it, the concrete biting through her jeans. The air in the unit hung heavy, laced with the musty tang of aged paper and leather, undercut by the faint, metallic bite of rust from the doorframe. Outside, the morning breeze whispered against the chain-link fence, carrying the distant rumble of a truck shifting gears, a world indifferent to the secrets unfolding here. Easy now, Ray murmured, his voice a low anchor in the quiet. He set his toolbox down with a soft clunk, the sound echoing off the metal walls. These old latches can stick. Seen 'em hold on to more than just clothes. His eyes, crinkled at the corners from years squinting at leaks and locks, met hers briefly, patient, without pity. Elena appreciated that. Pity would have cracked her resolve. She nodded, flipping the clasps. They resisted at first, then gave way with a reluctant snap like a sigh long held. Inside, the case was a time capsule of meticulous care. Folded neatly atop a layer of tissue paper lay a collection of silk ties, patterns faded but elegant, paisleys and stripes from an era when men dressed for flights like occasions. Beneath them, a wooden box, polished oak no bigger than a loaf of bread. Elena's breath hitched as she lifted it out, the weight surprising, solid, like it carried more than trinkets. Ray leaned in, his shadow merging with hers on the floor. "Go on," he said softly. "Whatever's in there, it's been waiting longer than us." Her fingers trembled on the lid, the wood smooth under her calluses from endless diner shifts. A small brass key dangled from a chain inside the case. She fitted it in, turning until the lock clicked free. The lid rose on silent hinges, revealing compartments lined with velvet. In one, a pocket watch, its face engraved with swirling initials, EM again. In another, a stack of photographs, edges curled. Elias younger, arm around a woman with laughing eyes. Clara, perhaps, standing before a seaside villa in what looked like Italy. Black and white shots of bustling markets. Him haggling over crates of what might have been antiques, vases, figurines, paintings rolled tight. The last compartment held a thin envelope, unsealed, with "For Clara, if I don't return," scrawled in precise ink. Elena's throat tightened as she slid out the contents. A handwritten letter, dated 15 years back, and a deed to property. A modest house in the suburbs. The same address from the license. Words jumped out. "I've taken risks for the deals, love, chasing imports that promised security. But the last one soured. Debts from a partner who vanished, leaving me holding the losses. If this is goodbye, the cases hold what I could salvage, heirlooms, not riches, but pieces of lives I traded. Sell them honest, for our boy if I'm gone. Our boy. Elena's mind reeled. A son. The letter trailed into apologies, mentions of a diagnosis, something chronic, unspoken, that had driven him to pack and flee rather than burden. Ray read over her shoulder, his breath steady. Imports, huh? Port work was full of that. Folks shipping art, relics. Elias? Yeah, rings a bell now. Quiet guy. Came through here once or twice, renting space for overflow. Never said much, but looked like he carried the world. He paused, rubbing his jaw, the stubble rasping under his fingers. Wife. Clara. Passed a few years after he did. Heart attack, they said. No one's claimed this stuff. Family scattered or maybe ashamed of the mess he left. The words landed like stones in Elena's chest. Mess, not crime, but the quiet unraveling of a life. Debts, illness, the impulse to vanish and start over, only to leave echoes in a storage unit. She thought of Marco, how he'd hidden his worries behind smiles, never letting her see the factory's toll until it was too late. These suitcases weren't contraband. They were regrets, packed away like the grief she carried for her husband. But value glinted here too. Those antiques in the photos, if real, could fetch enough to cover months of rent, new shoes for Sophia, maybe even a community college class she'd eyed for years. Temptation coiled in her gut, sharp as the fluorescent buzz overhead. Yet fear shadowed it. What if the sour deal meant trouble? Stolen goods? She imagined investigators combing the unit, questions turning to accusations, Sophia's face crumpling as social services knocked. "We should stop," she whispered, closing the box with care. "Document it all, like you said. Call someone. The police? Or find his family?" Her voice cracked, the moral weight pressing like the unit's cool air against her skin. Ray straightened, wiping dust from his hands on his overalls. The gesture was deliberate, grounding. Smart, but not cops first. Not if it's just a man's failed dreams. Start with the deed, trace the house. Might be heirs out there, or a lawyer. I've got a buddy at the county records. Retired clerk. Can point you right, no strings. He glanced at the stacks, rows of suitcases like silent witnesses. You're not in this alone, Elena. Seen too many folks here gamble everything and lose. But you've got that look. The kind that chooses right even when it's hard. His words warmed her, unexpected as sunlight piercing the corridor's gloom. For the first time since the auction, the knot in her stomach eased, replaced by a fragile resolve. They spent the next hour cataloguing, snapping photos on her phone, noting tags and initials, the smell of old journeys thickening the air. Another case yielded books, ledgers of sales, modest sums from antique fairs, no red flags but plenty of heart, notes on pieces' histories, families they'd come from. No fortune, but integrity in the margins. Returned to owner, too sentimental to sell. By midday, sweat beaded Elena's forehead, the yard's heat seeping in as the sun climbed. She locked the unit, the click final yet promising. Driving to pick up Sophia, the key and photos heavy in her pocket, doubt lingered. Unearth Elias's story, return what wasn't hers, and maybe find a way forward? Or pocket the small valuables, justify it for her daughter's sake. The traffic hummed around her, ordinary lives blurring past, while inside the crossroads loomed sharper. Ray's offer echoed, a helper in the rust and dust, reminding her that courage wasn't solitary. But as she pulled up to Mrs. Ramirez's, Sophia's wave lighting the dashboard, Elena wondered if the life-changing secret was the risk itself, opening not just suitcases, but the door to trust again. Comment where you're watching from. I want to know how far these stories of courage in forgotten places can travel. The afternoon sun beat down on the storage facility's asphalt lot, turning the air into a shimmering haze that clung to Eleanor's skin like regret. She sat in the Ford's cab, engine idling, the dashboard clock ticking past one, as Sophia chattered from the back seat about a playground adventure with Mrs. Ramirez's cat. Eleanor's mind was elsewhere, tangled in the unit's shadows, the letter's ink fading like Elias's promises, the deed a fragile map to answers she wasn't sure she wanted. Ray's number was scrawled on a napkin in her glove compartment, his offer to connect her with the county clerk hanging like a lifeline. But trust was a muscle she'd let atrophy since Marco's accident, and reaching for it now felt as exposed as those open suitcases. "Everything okay, Mama?" Sophia's voice pulled her back, small fingers tugging at the seatbelt. Elena forced a smile into the rearview mirror, her daughter's eyes wide and searching. "Just tired from work, mi amor. Ice cream later." Sophia's nod was instant, her curls bouncing, and Elena's heart ached with the simplicity of it. This child, this life, they were why she'd bid on the unit, why she couldn't let fear win. But as she merged onto the highway, the traffic's low roar mirroring her unease, the moral split widened. Return Elias's remnants to whatever family lingered, and walk away empty-handed, or sift deeper, claim enough to bridge the gap between survival and stability. The photos from the wooden box lay tucked in her purse, Elias's stern face staring up whenever she glanced, a ghost demanding reckoning. That evening, after tucking Sophia in with a story about faraway adventures, ironic given the suitcases, Elena sat at the kitchen table under the harsh glow of a single bulb. The apartment smelled of reheated spaghetti and faint lavender from the neighbor's laundry, a domestic anchor against the chaos brewing. She spread out the photos and the deed, her fingers tracing the house's address. 142 Oak Ridge Lane, a quiet street she'd driven past once or twice, delivering takeout to affluent homes that mocked her own fraying edges. The letter's words replayed. Debts from a soured deal, a chronic illness unspoken, the case is a salvage for our boy. Who was he? A son adrift, perhaps, like Sophia might be if Elena faltered. She pulled out her phone, hesitating over Ray's number. The screen's light cast her face in blue, shadows pooling under her eyes from another sleepless stretch. She dialed before doubt could stop her. Ray answered on the second ring, his voice gravelly but warm, like the facility's concrete warmed by day. "Elena? Figured you'd call. My buddy Lou at Records. He's on it. Pulled the deed history. House sold after Clara passed, but to a trust. Elias had a son, Daniel, mid-30s now. Lives out of state, hasn't touched the estate stuff." A pause, the faint clink of tools in the background. Lou says no liens, but whispers of Elias skipping town on bad investments, art imports gone wrong, not illegal, just desperate. Folks thought he ran off with a payout, but the unit suggests otherwise. Elena's breath caught, the chair creaking under her as she leaned forward. Desperate. The word fit Elias like it did her, packing a life into cases, hoping distance would rewrite the ending. And the son. Does he know about this place? Ray sighed, the sound carrying the weight of years spent witnessing abandonments. Doubt it. Clara's obit mentioned Daniel enlisting right after. Army, overseas tours. Came back changed. Kept distance. If those suitcases are his dad's, it might stir up old ghosts. You want me to reach out? Or you? The question hung, sharpening the crossroads. Call Daniel herself. Hand over the pieces of a father he might resent. It felt right, compassionate, the path Marco would have chosen. Honest, even if it meant no windfall. But the suitcases held potential. Antiques from those ledgers, perhaps enough to pay the mortgage arrears, enroll Sophia in art classes she'd begged for. Greed whispered, subtle as the apartment's creaking pipes, that she could sell quietly, justify it as finders' rights. No one would know. Yet the buzz of the fridge echoed the facility's lights, a reminder that secrets corroded from the inside. "I'll do it," she said finally, voice steady despite the tremor. "But tomorrow, with you there, if that's okay." Ray agreed without hesitation. "Bright and early. Bring coffee, black, no sugar. We'll open a few more, see the full picture. Night, Elena." The line clicked off, leaving her in the quiet, the deed's paper crinkling as she folded it away. Sleep came fitfully, dreams blending Elias's seaside photos with Marco's factory uniform, suitcases spilling not treasures but accusations. What kind of mother gambles with ghosts? Dawn broke grey and humid, the sky heavy with unshed rain as Eleanor parked at the facility. Ray was waiting by Unit 47, thermos in hand, his overalls dusted from morning rounds. The yard hummed with early activity, a delivery truck idling, the chain-link fence rattling in the breeze. But the corridor felt worlds away, insulated by metal and memory. "Got Lou's file," he said, handing her a printed sheet. "Daniel Morrow, address in Colorado, a mechanic now, single, no kids." The obit clipping attached, Clara's passing, a brief note on Elias's extended absence. Elena's stomach knotted. This wasn't just storage, it was a family's fracture, left to rust. They entered the unit together, the doors scraped louder in the still air, releasing that familiar leather and mildew breath. Dust swirled in the slanted light, motes catching like fireflies. Elena chose a larger case this time. Black vinyl with reinforced corners, its tag reading Berlin 98. The latches popped easily under Ray's steady hands and they eased it open on the concrete. Inside, no clothes or journals, but crates, small wooden ones, padded with straw. Her pulse raced as Ray pried one lid, revealing porcelain figurines, delicate ballerinas, gilded clocks, pieces that screamed value. "Antiques," he confirmed, turning one over to reveal a maker's mark. "Real deal. Could be thousands, easy." Elias wasn't lying about imports. But beneath the straw lay something sharper, a crumpled newspaper clipping, yellowed, headlining a scandal. "Local importer flees after forgery ring exposed." Elias's name wasn't mentioned, but the dates aligned. The port's imports scrutinized. Forgery? Elena's hands froze mid-reach, the air thickening with suspicion. Not desperate dreams, but a brush with crime. Perhaps unwitting, but tangled enough to taint everything. "This changes it," she whispered, the words echoing off the walls. Ray's face tightened, the fluorescent buzz overhead amplifying the tension. "Does it? Clipping's old, no charges. But if Daniel's dad was mixed up, you return it, risk pulling him into the muck. Keep it, you're no better." The moral fork twisted deeper, fear coiling like the unit's shadows. Call Daniel now, expose the forgery hint, and let him decide? Or seal it back, pretend the value was clean, sell piecemeal for Sophia's future? Rain pattered against the roof, a soft drumbeat urging choice. Elena thought of her daughter's trusting wave yesterday, Marco's voice in memory. Do right, even when it hurts. Ray watched her silent support in his stance as she pulled out her phone. The number for Daniel stared back, a door as daunting as any latch. With a breath that rattled the quiet, she pressed call, the ringtone cutting through the musty air like a confession. Whatever came next, rejection, gratitude, or unraveling, she'd face it open-eyed, the suitcase's secrets no longer buried, but shared in the light of hard-won truth. The phone rang in Elena's hand, each tone slicing through the unit's stale air like a blade testing flesh. Rain drummed harder on the metal roof now, a relentless patter that blurred the world outside into a grey veil, the chain-link fence beyond the open door rattling like bones in the wind. Ray stood a step back, his presence solid as the concrete floor, toolbox forgotten at his feet. He didn't speak, just nodded once, his weathered face etched with the quiet understanding of someone who'd seen too many calls change everything. Eleanor's free hand gripped the edge of a suitcase, the vinyl cool and unyielding under her palm, grounding her as the line connected on the fifth ring. "Hello?" The voice was cautious, edged with the gravel of long hours under hoods. Daniel, she knew it instantly from the records, a mechanic's drawl tempered by distance. "Hi, is this Daniel Morrow?" Elena's words came out steadier than she felt, though her heart hammered against her ribs, echoing the rain's rhythm. The unit's shadows seemed to deepen, the fluorescent light from the corridor flickering faintly, casting erratic patterns on the stacked cases like whispers of doubt. A pause, the faint hum of a TV in the background. "Yeah, who's this?" Suspicion laced his tone, not hostile but guarded, the kind born from years of keeping walls up. "My name's Elena Vasquez. I bought a storage unit at the facility off Route 12. Contents belong to your father, Elias, or at least that's what it looks like. Journals, photos, a deed to the old house on Oak Ridge." She swallowed, the musty scent of leather rising as she shifted, dust stirring under her boots. Ray's eyes met hers, encouraging, his rag twisted idly in his hands. Silence stretched, broken only by the rain's intensifying roar and a distant thunder rumble that vibrated through the metal walls. When Daniel spoke again, his voice cracked, raw as exposed wire. "Dad? That unit's been locked since before Mom died. How'd you, bought it? Auction?" Elena nodded, though he couldn't see, her fingers tracing the faded tag on the nearest case. Berlin, 98. A ghost of journeys unfinished. Abandoned, liens cleared. I didn't know at first. Just suitcases, old ones, but inside. Letters to Clara, ledgers from his import work, and this clipping about the port scandal. She hesitated, the moral weight pressing like the humid air, thick and suffocating. Telling him everything now meant dragging him into the forgery shadow. The sour deals that might tarnish his memories, but hiding it, that would make her complicit, another layer of abandonment. Daniel exhaled sharply, the sound carrying across states like a shared burden. "Scandal. Yeah, I remember the whispers. Dad never came clean, said it was bad partners, fakes slipped in shipments. He packed up one night, left a note about starting fresh overseas. Mom waited years then. She just stopped." His words trailed, heavy with the grief Elena recognized too well, the kind that settled in bones after loss. "What else? You got his watch, the one Grandpa gave him." She glanced at the wooden box from earlier, its lid now closed but the memory vivid, the engraved face ticking silently in her mind. "Yeah, and photos, you and him, seaside, figurines, antiques he traded." The rain sheeted down outside, blurring the yard into a watercolor of rust and oil-slicked puddles, the traffic's hum muted to a low drone. Elena's throat tightened. This wasn't about profit anymore. It was restitution, piecing together a father's fragments for a son who'd carried the absence like a scar. Another pause, longer this time, the line crackling faintly. Ray shifted, his boots scraping softly on the grit, a subtle reminder she wasn't alone. "Look," Daniel said finally, voice thickening. "I joined up right after Army, deployments that kept me away. Came back, house was sold, unit forgotten. Figured Dad was gone for good, debts or whatever chasing him. If you've got his stuff, hell, I don't know. Sell it or send it. I ain't rich, but maybe it's closure." Elena's mind raced, the crossroads forking sharper. Send it all, deed, watch, letters, and walk away with nothing but the knowledge she'd done right? The antiques alone could fund Sophia's braces, a down payment on stability, but at what cost to her conscience? The clipping burned in her pocket, its implications a quiet accusation. Elias had skirted the edge, desperate for security, much like her now. "It's not just things," she said, choosing words like steps on thin ice. "The letter. He mentioned you. For our boy. Said the cases held salvage, honest pieces. But the scandal. If there's fallout, legal stuff, I don't want to pull you in blind." Ray leaned against the doorframe, rain misting his cap, his nod imperceptible, but felt. Daniel chuckled bitterly, the sound hollow. "Fallout? 10 years gone. Cops closed it, partners took the hit, Dad just vanished. Closure sounds good, Elena. Ship what you can, I'll cover costs. And thanks for calling. Most wouldn't." The call ended with a promise. Details tomorrow, addresses exchanged. But Elena stood frozen as she pocketed the phone, the unit's air cooler now, laced with petrichor drifting in from the storm. Ray cleared his throat gently. "You did good. Hard call, but right." His eyes scanned the rows, suitcases like sentinels of interrupted lives. Now what? Catalogue the rest, pack for shipping, or... She knelt by the open case, fingers brushing a porcelain ballerina, its glaze cool and fragile. Value hummed beneath her touch. Thousands. Ray had said, but so did the human cost. Elias's desperation mirrored her own, packing away regrets, hoping for a fresh start that never came. For Sophia, she could justify keeping a peace, but Marco's memory whispered no. Integrity over ease, always. "We finish opening them," she decided, voice gaining strength amid the rain's lullaby. "Document every bit. If it's clean, Daniel gets it. If not, we find out together before it touches anyone else." They worked through the afternoon, the storm easing to a drizzle that pattered softly, sunlight fracturing through clouds to gild the wet asphalt outside. Case after case yielded layers, a silver locket with Clara's photo inside etched forever. Ledgers showing modest profits from fair trades, margins noting verified authentic, returned fakes. A worn Bible, pages marked with Elias's underlines on forgiveness and wandering. No smoking gun, just a portrait of a man fraying at edges. Illness notes tucked in one journal. A doctor's letter hinting at early dementia, the reason for his flight not greed, but fear of fading. By dusk, the unit felt less like a tomb, more like a confessional, the air lighter despite the damp. Elena's hands ached from lifting, but clarity bloomed. Return it all, not for reward, but to mend what abandonment broke. Ray helped seal the last case, his rag wiping sweat from his brow. "Proud of you," he said simply, the words landing warm as the fading light. Driving home through puddles that mirrored the sky's clearing blue, Sophia's laughter on the phone ahead, Elena felt the shift. Fear yielding to purpose, the secret not in suitcases, but in choosing to carry another's story forward. Tomorrow, shipping them, and perhaps, in the empty space left, room for her own rebuilding. The evening light slanted through the unit's open door, turning the rain-slicked yard outside into a mosaic of silver and shadow. The chain-link fence dripping like forgotten tears. Elena's back ached from hours, bent over the suitcases, her fingers smudged with dust and the faint residue of aged ink. But the work had forged a rhythm between her and Ray, a quiet partnership born in the unit's confined hush. The air inside had shifted too, less oppressive now, carrying hints of the storm's clean petrichor, mingling with the persistent leather and mildew. They'd catalogued nearly all the cases, ties and toiletries giving way to more ledgers, a few pieces of jewelry tucked like afterthoughts, each item photographed and noted in Elena's spiral notebook, its pages filling with a meticulous honesty that felt like atonement. Ray straightened from sealing another crate, his knees popping softly in the quiet, and wiped his forehead with the back of his hand, leaving a streak of grime. "One left," he said, nodding toward the tallest suitcase at the back, a weathered leather trunk with brass fittings dulled by time, its surface scarred from what looked like ocean voyages, salt pits and faded stamps from ports Elena had only seen in Sophia's picture books. It stood apart, almost defiant, as if it knew it held the core of Elias's unraveling. The fluorescent buzz from the corridor hummed overhead, syncing with the distant drip of water from the eaves, a metronome to her mounting pulse. Elena approached it slowly, boots scraping the gritty concrete, her breath shallow in the cooling air. This one felt different, heavier, the latches rusted shut as if sealed with intent. Ray handed her a small pry bar from his toolbox, the metal cool against her palm, and she worked it gently, the wood frame creaking in protest. Memories flickered, Marco teaching her to fix the apartment's stubborn locks, his hands steady over hers, whispering that some things were worth the effort to open. Doubt crept in now. What if this trunk hid the forgery's proof, a ledger of fakes that could drag Daniel down or, worse, implicate her for touching it? The moral thread pulled taut. She'd come this far for truth, but truth could shatter as easily as save. The latches gave way with a sharp crack, echoing off the metal walls like a verdict. Ray's flashlight beam cut through as she lifted the lid, hinges groaning, revealing a nest of oilcloth wrapping what looked like paintings. Rolled canvases bound with twine nestled beside a locked metal strongbox the size of a briefcase. The scent intensified here, a deeper mustiness laced with linseed oil and varnish, evoking attics of forgotten artistry. Elena's hands trembled as she unrolled the first canvas, the paper crinkling softly. It unfurled to reveal a landscape. Hillside olive groves under a Mediterranean sun, brushstrokes fluid and alive, signed in the corner with a flourish. E. Moreau, 1987. Not Elias's hand, but one he'd carried, perhaps acquired in those import deals. Art, Ray breathed, leaning in, his shadow merging with hers on the canvas's surface. Real stuff. Could be originals. Moreau was big in the 80s. French expat. If these are legit. He trailed off, the implication hanging in the dim light. The rain's patter outside a soft underscore to possibility. Eleanor's mind reeled. Value bloomed in her thoughts. Thousands, tens of thousands if authenticated. Enough to clear debts, secure a future where Sophia's dreams weren't rationed by tips. But the clipping's shadow loomed. Were these the fakes slipped in shipments? Keeping them meant gambling on silence, a quiet theft masked as survival. Returning them to Daniel could gift him closure and fortune, but what if the scandal resurfaced, tainting his life anew? She turned to the strongbox next, its combination lock staring back like a challenge. No key, but Elias's journals had hinted. Birth dates, anniversaries scribbled in margins. Elena tried Clara's from the obit, fingers dialing the tumblers with a click-click that amplified in the unit's hush. It opened on the third try, the lid springing free to reveal stacks of documents, shipping manifests, certificates of authenticity stamped by appraisers, even a lawyer's letter dated just before his disappearance. Provenance clear, one read, detailing legitimate sales from European estates. Elias as middleman for a gallery that had folded in the recession. No forgeries. The scandal had been his partner's, a separate shipment he'd refused, leading to threats that drove him to hide everything here, intending to reclaim it once safe. Relief washed over her, warm as the fading sunlight filtering through the door, but tangled with a deeper revelation. Tucked beneath the papers was a final envelope, addressed not to Clara, but to whom it may concern, finder's heir. Inside, Elias's script, shaky from illness. If you read this, I've failed to return. The art is clean, earned through honest trade. Sell it for your own, pay forward what life denied me. My son deserves better, but so do you. Forgive the mess. A notary seal dated months before Clara's death confirmed it. A quasi-legal bequest, abandoning claim to any finder who proved worthy by seeking truth. Elena's eyes stung, the air thick with emotion now. The trunk's contents a bridge from his tragedy to her own. This was the life-changing secret, not riches alone, but permission, a stranger's faith in integrity. Ray placed a hand on her shoulder, light as a question, his voice low. He saw it coming. Knew someone like you might open this door. The gesture anchored her, unexpected kinship in the rust-scented space, reminding her that allies emerged from the unlikeliest corners, mirrors to her resolve. She closed the trunk slowly, the click of the latches a commitment. Call Daniel again, share the bequest. Let him choose, but offer to help sell, split proceeds fairly, turning Elias's salvage into shared redemption. No more crossroads alone. Ray would witness, perhaps even join the legwork with his contacts. As they stepped out into the drizzling dusk, the yard's asphalt steaming underfoot, Elena locked the door with steady hands. The key felt lighter now, the unit no longer a gamble, but a turning point. Driving home through clearing skies, Sophia's bedtime story waiting, hope flickered, not desperate but earned, the suitcase's weight lifting into possibility. One luggage had held not just secrets, but a quiet justice, whispering that courage opened more than locks. If this story already has your heart, hit the like button. It helps the story of Elena reach more people who still believe in second chances. The weeks blurred into a steady cadence of purpose, the storage facility's corridors no longer echoing with Elena's solitary footsteps, but with the shared rhythm of her and Ray's efforts. Mornings began with coffee in styrofoam cups, black and steaming, handed over the chain-link fence as the industrial yard woke under a hazy dawn. The air carried the sharp bite of dew on asphalt, mingling with the faint rust from the metal doors. And Eleanor found herself arriving earlier each day, the key to Unit 47 a familiar weight in her pocket rather than a burden. Sophia noticed the change first. Her mother's eyes brighter, the kitchen table cleared of bill stacks, replaced by neatly folded manifests and appraisal forms. "You're smiling more, Mama," she'd say, crayon in hand, and Eleanor would pull her close, inhaling the scent of soap and childhood, whispering that good things came from opening the right doors. The call to Daniel had unfolded not in the unit's shadows, but over a quiet lunch at a roadside diner near the facility. Ray across the booth, nursing his own coffee, while Eleanor spoke into her phone. The rain from that stormy afternoon had cleared, leaving the sky a vast, unblemished blue that mirrored the clarity she'd grasped. Daniel's voice had softened over the miles, surprise giving way to a tentative gratitude as she described the trunk's contents. The canvases, the strongbox, Elias's final words scrawled like a will from beyond. "He left it for a finder?" Daniel had echoed, the line crackling with emotion. "Dad always talked about paying forward, even when things went south. Send what you can. I'll come east next month, see it myself. And if there's value, and we split it fair, you've earned that much." Fairness became their compass. Elena and Ray worked methodically, the unit transforming from a crypt of secrets to a workshop of restitution. They unrolled each canvas under the corridor's fluorescent hum, the lights buzzing like distant bees as sunlight slanted in golden shafts, illuminating brush strokes that whispered of distant hills and forgotten estates. Ray's buddy Lou connected them to an appraiser, a retired gallery owner with wire-rimmed glasses and a gentle skepticism, who arrived one crisp Tuesday, his van crunching gravel in the lot. The air thickened with the scent of linseed oil as he examined the pieces, nodding slowly over the Moreau landscape. "Authentic," he declared, the word landing soft as dust settling. "Mid-career work, provenance solid, 15,000 for the set, conservative." Elena's hand steadied on a suitcase handle, the leather warm from the morning's touch. It was more than she'd dreamed. Enough to cover the mortgage, buy Sophia new books, maybe even start that online course in business she'd shelved since Marco's death. But the figurines and jewelry followed suit, porcelain dancers fetching 3,000 at auction, the silver locket drawing bids from collectors who prized its inscription. They documented everything, photos time-stamped, certificates copied, the process a quiet ritual that wove Elias's integrity into their own. No shortcuts, no shadowed sales. Every transaction ran through legal channels. The storage facility's manager, Hank, signing off with a gruff approval after Ray vouched for her. "You're doing it right, kid," Hank had said, clipboard in hand, his eyes lingering on the now thinning stacks of suitcases. Daniel arrived mid-process, a tall man in his 30s with Elias's stern jaw softened by fatigue, his truck pulling up at sunset, the yard's warm asphalt radiating heat like a hearth. He stepped into the unit hesitantly, the air still laced with mildew and memory, and traced the initials on a case, E.M., his fingers lingering as Elena had once done. They talked late into the evening. The four of them, Elena, Ray, Daniel, and even Sophia, who tagged along with wide-eyed curiosity, sitting on folding chairs amid the crates, sharing takeout from the diner. The distant traffic hummed beyond the fence, a lullaby to stories exchanged. Daniel's deployments, the silence after Clara's heart attack, Elias's letters read aloud under the buzzing lights. Laughter broke through, tentative at first, as Sophia held up a porcelain clock, asking if it ticked like Daddy's old watch. Daniel's eyes misted, but he nodded, handing her the locket. "Your mum found more than stuff," he told her. "She found us." The split came easy, half to Daniel for his father's closure, enough to fix his shop's roof and visit more often. The rest to Elena, a lifeline that paid debts and seeded dreams. Ray, ever the anchor, suggested they partner on a small resale venture, vintage finds from auctions, handled with the same care. "Beats fixing leaks alone," he said, his smile crinkling the corners of his eyes, and Elena felt the spark of something new, a quiet alliance blooming in the rust and dust. Months later, the unit stood empty, its metal door rolled up to reveal bare concrete walls scarred by faint outlines where suitcases had rested. Elena returned one overcast afternoon, the yard quiet save for the wind whispering through the chain link, carrying the faint scent of oil and distant rain. Sophia skipped ahead, her new sneakers, bought with the first check, scuffing the asphalt, while Ray trailed with a toolbox, now tools for building rather than prying. The space echoed hollowly as they stepped inside, the fluorescent lights flickering to life overhead, casting long shadows that no longer hid secrets. Eleanor ran a hand along the wall, feeling the cool metal, the grit of dust long settled. It was just a shell now, a monument to risks taken and truths unearthed. But in its emptiness lay freedom. The mortgage paid, Sophia's art classes underway, Elena's course halfway done, evenings shared with Ray over coffee that tasted like possibility. Daniel had left a note taped to the door before they cleared the last case. "Thanks for opening what I couldn't. Dinner soon, family now." Eleanor folded it into her pocket, the paper soft as Elias's letter, and turned to Ray, their hands brushing in the dim light. The hum of traffic beyond the fence swelled, the world moving forward, carrying her with it. In that vacant space, she saw not loss, but the quiet courage of doors chosen, ones that led from fear to the steady light of second chances. Subscribe for more stories of compassion, justice, and redemption. Thank you for watching the case of the old suitcases. See you in the next one. The echo of a single open door lingers longest, reminding us that some secrets once shared build bridges where walls once stood.